And you will see a little black and white pattern starting to show up in there. That's a small spot of temporary stress. Now there's going to be a few things that I'm going to be showing you in this window throughout the show, so if you can find a place where you can actually see the window, that will be make it more interesting for you. So the stress that we're talking about here is made of two parts, and they're called compression and tension. I'm going to illustrate those for you with this foam block. If I squeeze the foam, I'm creating some compression. But you can see that no matter how hard I squeeze it, that's not likely to break the foam because compression is actually making it stronger. But tension is a pulling stress, and if I pull hard on that, it tears apart really easily. So tension makes the foam weaker, compression makes it stronger, and the same thing is true with glass. But in a piece of glass, if there are stresses, they get paired up. And so if there's an area of compression, it forces another area into tension. And depending on how those stresses get arranged in any particular piece of glass, they can make it more likely to break, like the bottle did. But then there are some cases where they use those same stresses on purpose, and they make glass that's less likely to break. So we're going to see an example of that in just a minute also. Plastic also swells when it's heated and shrinks as it cools. I bet some of you might have broken a CD case before. I'm going to show you why. There's a whole bunch of uneven stress trapped in there, and that's because plastic is manufactured in a way that's similar to glass. So it gets heated up, shaped in a mold, and cooled. The thin parts are going to cool faster than the thick parts, and since everything's shrinking and tugging, it's creating stress. And this particular product doesn't go through an annealing cycle, and so the stress just ends up locked in there once it's down to room temperature. That's what's making that plastic so brittle. And you might wonder, well, why are we looking at plastic? I thought this was the glass breaking demo, and it is. But if I had a piece of glass, that same shape with that same kind of uneven stress trapped in it, oh, that would be so unstable, it wouldn't be very safe for me to handle it. But we wanted you to see what a lot of stress looks like. And so we look at it in that nice safe piece of plastic, and then we can compare that to our glass samples. Standard window glass. This is just like we all have at home. It is annealed, and so no stress to be seen in there. Laminated glass has two layers of annealed glass, and there's a really thin layer of plastic in between there that's holding them together. No stress here either. The important difference between this one and the first one is the layering, and this is also called safety glass. Thermally tempered glass. This one's 5 times stronger than annealed glass. Wow. It's loaded with stress. So there's our example of glass where the stress is making it stronger because that stress was put in there on purpose, and you might notice it has a kind of organized pattern to it. So this started as annealed glass. It was just like that first piece to start with. The idea was really first understood. And basically it's a bubble of glass. So it's open on one end, it's very thick on the other end, and they make the bubbles for us here over at the hot glass demo, and then they just cool them in the air. That's a pretty unusual thing to do with glass. In fact, that goes against everything I just told you. And in fact, you do end up with a lot of uneven stress trapped in there because that glass is not annealed at all. And you're going to see that except for a demonstration like this one, you wouldn't have much use for a piece of glass that's not annealed because basically that piece of glass, it's not finished. All right, so we are going to break glass. In order to do that, I'm going to need a volunteer. All the way back and just let go. Perfect. So annealed glass breaks in a familiar way. If you've ever dropped a drinking glass, accidentally thrown something through a window, you end up with sharp shards of glass, all different sizes and shapes, and they're flying out in all directions because of the impact. So annealed glass is really common. It's very useful, and it breaks into sharp pieces. So it's probably not the kind of glass we want for something like a car windshield. In case that glass breaks while you're driving, you don't want the shards flying toward you. And so for that, they use the laminated. You can go ahead with that one. Nice. Laminated or safety glass. And you can see why it's called safety glass. The layer of plastic is holding the shards together. So that's the kind of glass that's used for car windshields. It keeps the shards from flying into the car in case of an impact. Bullet-resistant glass is another interesting type of laminated glass, but it'll be made of multiple layers of glass and plastic together. Thermally tempered, remember this is the one. Very impact resistant, 5 times stronger than the annealed glass. Go right ahead with that one. Still breaks really well in our case, and that's because here at the Glass Breaking Show, we are determined to break all the glass. So we make sure that really strong piece of glass breaks by putting a sharp point on the end of that particular hammer. Because remember, compression on the surface is making it impact resistant. So I can pound on that really hard and not be able to break it. But when Jan scratched through it with the pointy hammer, we're getting down into the fragile tension area, and tempered glass breaks in a pretty recognizable way. You'll see this little pattern of cubes in there, and the edges of the pieces are relatively square. They're not nearly as sharp as shards of annealed glass. So tempered glass gets used in places where it would be especially dangerous to have those shards, like shower doors, picture windows, the backboards of basketball hoops. This little latch on this hammer, so that when you lift it up, it's not going to pop out of the booth, okay? So what you're going to do is grab the hammer, lift up, and then give that a nice hard whack, please. And remember, there's a lot of stress in there, so hit that again. One more time for good measure. Very good. So Jan's hitting it hard, and when we expect it to break easily, we saw there was a lot of stress in there. But there's a couple reasons why it won't break easily, and one of them just has to do with the shape. So you'll notice that's basically an egg shape. And we don't think about eggs being strong. We crack them easily. But if you try to crush an egg just by squeezing it,